Hello, this is Randy with Excel for Freelancers, and welcome to the Job Application Manager. In this training, I'm going to show you how you can create your own dynamic content cover letter along with automated email to help out the entire job application process. It's going to be an incredible training. Track unlimited jobs. I cannot wait. Let's get started. All right, thanks so much for joining me. I got a really fantastic training for you. The entire process of applying for jobs can be a nightmare. We're going to simplify that today. We're going to be able to create your own dynamic cover letters, automate email process, track unlimited types of jobs. We're going to be able to show jobs, load jobs here, track all the jobs, track correspondence between those jobs, what kind of correspondence, and also add, of course, new jobs and delete jobs, and of course, take Word documents, customize them, add pictures into them, and even regardless of the template. So you're going to be able to load different types of cover letter templates. It's going to be an incredible training, so I cannot wait. We're going to get started right away on this. So let's go ahead and go into the details of that. I'm going to show you how we're going to do every step. This particular training is going to include lots of different features and focus, so I hope you'll stick with us on the entire training. So how are we going to do this? Well, we've got a lot to show you here. I've got an info and settings screen here. It's going to track different information about job status, job information here. We've got a job database here, correspondence, and we're going to be able to save email templates. We've got template emails. So a lot to go on this. I hope you enjoy these training. I make these for you each and every week. In fact, every Tuesday. So if you do like these trainings, don't forget to subscribe and click that notification icon bell. That's going to ensure that these trainings are free each and every week. And you can also download this workbook absolutely free using the links in the description below, either with your email or Facebook Messenger, and we're going to get that sent on over right away to you. However, if you do like these templates and you want to help us out, a great way to do that would be to download the 200 workbooks. It's just $77, and that's 200 of my best templates. You're free to do whatever you want with them once you get them downloaded. So it's a great purchase, and it's just less than 40 cents per template. So I hope you'll pick that up. All right, let's get started on this training because I got a lot to show you. Like I'd mentioned, job application can be a nightmare. Managing documents, managing applications, cover letters, customizing them, sending them, following up with the jobs. It's a big deal. And so we want to make that entire process easier. This application is going to do that. But not only that, and more importantly so, I'm going to show you how you can make your own applications. Not only that, I'm going to show you how you can automatically work with Excel and Word together. This is an embedded Word document, and then we'll be able to automatically just create and customize it based on the template. So we're going to use different variables so that all we need to do is just click once, and it's going to be edited just like that automatically. So that dynamic information is going to come in. We've got company information about the job, right? What is the name of the job? What is the company name, and all the information concerning the job. We've also got your own personal information, and that's going to come here. So you've got your name, your last name, address, what's the information about you, and also we have a folder. Where do we want to store these jobs? Those particular jobs are going to be in a separate folder, and that's the beauty of it. So for example, in here, we have a jobs folder, and each one of these, we're going to be able to track different jobs based on the company and the job. So every time you have a new job, it'll create a brand new subfolder in here so you can track all the attachments, all the cover letters inside a single folder. I'm going to show you how to do all of that, so make sure you stick with us on the entire training. Also, we have some information we can keep experience and education here. That's more of a helpful hint. And we also have cover letters. You can add different cover letters in here. You can build them up, so however many cover letters you want. I just downloaded these from the Word library. Microsoft Word has some libraries online that you can download these cover letters. So we've got that going on. So we got a little personal info and settings. So it's going to grab all that information. You'll want to select what folder you want your job. So all that job information has to go in one folder. Now, what folder is that? You'll be able to set that folder just by clicking here, and you'll be able to set that jobs folder right here and just click OK, and I'll show you. That's just a basic browse. You'll also want to set a profile picture. As you saw in this, we have a specific profile picture. Now, the template didn't have any picture. For example, the template itself just had a standard stock photo. So when I delete that, I'll show you what that is in a moment. That's going to delete this file so that when we reload the template's going to either load. So we have this stock picture, we have full name, job title, contact information. However, as soon as we create a cover letter based on this job information, all of that, notice the recipient, the company, it's all standard static text there, variables. However, when we create that cover letter, that's all going to be replaced with the individual company information, your name, your address, your information. All of that is going to come directly from the settings here, that information, this personal information here. And it's going to go right into that Word template. And that Word template, you can easily create an email from it. You can add templates and stuff. So if you have a cover letter here, let's load in our cover letter. We have a cover letter here. And we want to attach things, right? So we're going to add an attachment. And what do we want to do? We've got cover letter templates we can add. We can add specific jobs, right? They're all saved in here, so we can add that. We may want to add additional features. Maybe we want to add that cover letter here, so we can do that. So we can have multiple attachments. When we send that email, it's going to create a brand new email, and it's going to show it and display that email, and I'll bring that down for you. You see right here, we've got cover letter and footers, and we've got a dynamic email content based on the specific job details. So dynamic email content, dynamic Word documents, we've got lots of things going on here. So how are we going to get all this done? Well, very easily, I'm going to walk you step by step through the code, so nothing to worry about. Sit back, relax, have your drink of choice, and we're going to get started right away. Okay, I also want to have different jobs, right? So we can hide jobs or show jobs, right? So we may want to look up specific jobs. We may also want to search for specific jobs. For example, if I want to search in front, right, and then based on a job title, I can do that, and it's going to search just that specific job here. Or I can search by a company. Maybe I want to look at the Fredder's Pharmacy, and I want to know only that job for that company, and we can do that right here. Or we can clear that out and show all the jobs. When we select on a job, it's going to load those job details. And it's going to also load, if you've created a cover letter, it's going to load that cover letter. So for example, this particular one has no cover letter associated with that. So you see here when we show the documents, there's no cover letter, but we could also simply just select a cover letter, and that cover letter is going to display here. It's just going to be a template, but it'll display right there. So there it is. There's that cover letter. It's going to display here. So all we need to do is just create that cover letter here, or any template is going to show up again, just like we did. So we can use multiple cover letters. These are Word documents. These Word documents are embedded in Excel from a specific template. If you notice right here, different templates, these 4 templates are right here, cover letter 1 through 2. So they're just Word documents. If we open one up, it's no different than any other Word document, as you can see right here. But however, through the beauty of Excel VBA, we can automate the process of converting it to a custom template, and then we can create an actual letter from that. So a lot of really cool things. So I hope you'll stick with us on this. I'll try to go slow and cover everything as possible. Okay, so how are we going to get that done? Well, the first thing we want to do is we want to be able to save jobs, right? Create a new job, right? If we want to clear it out, or we want to save a job, or maybe we want to delete a job, or we want to load a job. And if I select on the job here, it'll load back up. So that's how we're going to do it, including any saved cover letters that we've created or saved for a specific job. All right, so how are we going to do this? Well, let's start inside the code. We've got a few different codes. I want to be able to browse for a folder. I want to be able to browse for a file picture. That's about the only code that's going to be running on the personal info and settings. So let's take a look inside the code, and that's going to come from our developer and Visual Basic. You can also click Alt F11 to quickly get you in there. And now if we take a look at it, we've got some info and setting macros here. I've got a module called info and settings. That has to do with just the 3 different macros that we're going to be associated. Now there's 3 different macros on that, and they're relatively simple, right? So I've got 2 here that are going to cover the browse, and I've got 1 here for adding a cover level. So as I select on here, that browse, so if I want to add one, it's going to browse for a specific cover letter here, just like that. So how are we going to get that done? Well, the best way to go about it is going to be based on either the button or the selection change. So the first one is going to be browse for the jobs folder. Now, when we browse for a jobs folder, we want that full path of that job folder to go directly inside here, inside E3. And so to do that, we'll have to use the file directory. So we're going to mention the job folder as a file dialog. And then we're going to set that job folder to the application file dialog. And we're going to browse for a folder picker, right? We're looking for a specific folder, not a file. Then what we're going to do is we're going to work with that job folder. I'm going to set a title called Browse for Jobs Folder. That is the title that appears on that pop-up. We don't want the user to select more than one. One is sufficient. So allow multi-select is going to be equal to false. Then if show does not equal -1, then go to no selection. And basically that means if they've pressed the cancel or they have not selected anything or closed the window out without selecting something, it's going to skip this. Go to no selection. However, if they have info screen, range E3, remember info is the name of that screen. That's the long code name of that. E3 is where we're going to put the select item. That selected item is the long file path. Now we're going to do something very similar with the picture. Now notice that the picture itself is going to go into the one below. I want the full file path of the picture, the profile picture. That's where the user is going to put their profile picture. So if we browse for that, and I'm looking for a specific picture on that person, I would find it here. Let's say Sally, we're looking for a JPEG, but this one I want to look for JPG, PNG, or GIF pictures. So I'm going to select Sally and click OK. It's going to place that entire path located right here on E4. And so how do we do that? Well, to do that, all we need to do in this case, again, profile picture, file dialog, but this one we're going to set that profile picture equal to the file dialog, but this time it's going to be a file picker, right? We're picking a specific file. This one was a folder, this one it's a file. This one I also want to set some filters on it, right? Filters meaning I don't want every single type of file. I only want specific types. So we're going to give it a title of please select the member default picture. We'll just put that, please select, let's change that, your profile picture. And then what do I want those filters to be? I only want the user, you could probably add more like BMP and a bunch of JPEG and things like that, but I just put 3. JPEG, PNG, or GIF. So these are the 3 types of pictures that we're going to allow. Again, multi-select, we only want them to select one picture. If they do anything other than select a picture, go to no selection. This time we're going to put that entire file path, which is going to be the selected items, we're going to put that inside E4. And then the next step, we want to browse for the cover letters. Now, browsing for the cover letters, that is the macro that's been tied to this button here, this icon here. As it moves down, that is the macro that's been tied to this button. So how are we going to do that? Well, the first thing is we want this to appear on the selected row. Selected row means selection change. When a user makes a selection change, it is then we want to appear there. So that's going to be a selection change event that's going to appear directly on the sheet. So if we take a look at the sheet here inside our info here at settings, we have a selection change event simply by selecting worksheet and then selection change. So it's event. If the target count, meaning the user selects more than one cell, we're going to exit the sub out. If they select one cell, then what we want to do, shapes browser letter button. Now this particular shape, the name of the shape, browser letter button, that is the same shape that we set to that. So when we select on that specific shape, we see that the name of the shape is called browser letter button. Okay, so that's just a name that we've given to that group. It's actually 2 shapes, so it's a group of both of those shapes. Okay, if for some reason it's visible, then we're going to hide it. And what does that do? That means anything that they select on the sheet, automatically it's going to hide it. I just want that hidden unless they select anything from O through P, right? I want to select anything from O through P, then I want it to display it. So if the user makes a selection between O7 and P19, then I want to do the following. With the shapes, this browser button, I want to place the left position in column Q. I want to place the top position in column Q on the top and of course the target row, that row that they've set. And then I want to make it visible. So I want to make sure that it's visible, making it visible. That's all I have to do to make sure that's visible. Once it's visible, the user can then set a specific file for that using the macro that's been assigned to that button, which is this one right here. First thing we need to do is define the selected row as long, and I want the cover letter as a file dialog. Cover letter, this time again, we're picking a file picker, right? We want a file. And then what we want to do is we want to set the selected row equal to the active cell row. That means whatever row they've selected, we're putting that into a variable, whether it's row 7, 8, 9, 10, whatever. We're going to put that into a variable, a long variable. Once we have that, what we can do is we can open that file dialog with the cover letter. We're going to give it called Browse for Word Templates. And in this one, again, we're going to set a filter because we want them to select only specific Word templates. DOC or DOCX, you could add additional templates in here, no problem. There's a bunch of them, but I just added the basic ones here. So what we're going to do, again, allowing them to select only one. Just if they make no selection, skip that. But this time, what do I want to do? I want to take two parts of that. I want both the file name here, and I want the entire path located in P. So that's what we're going to do. Inside O, we're going to put the file name. So how do we extract the file name? Well, we can use the directory command to do that. So info dot range O in the selected row, select row, equals the directory of the selected name. This is the entire path. When you add directory around it, it just extracts the file name from it. So all we're placing is the file name in column O. However, in column P, we want the entire file path. So to get that, we just use the selected items. That's going to put that entire path. All right, so that's all we need to do. Now we have a little bit of a named ranges. We've got some named ranges that we've set that are going to help us work with that. So let's take a look at some of the named ranges that we have on here. So inside the formulas and name manager, we'll bring this up here, and I've got a few of them. I've got cover letter name, and I'm going to shrink this down. It's a little bit larger than we need for our purposes. Cover letter name, well, that's based on the names of the cover letters. So if we move it up here and I tab into it, we see that the dancing ants around the names of the cover letter because we're using an offset formula that are going to only wrap around the specific data, right? So we're using offset, we're counting all the ones using offset so that we only contain the names and not the blanks. I'm going to do the same thing for the cover letter path. So we have two named range, one cover letter name and one cover letter path. So that's it. We also have another one here called job status. So if we tab out here, we see that we've got another one called job status. This is all the different types of job status that you can have. Job status is going to come in handy because it is that status that we're going to put right here inside the job status. I've got this zoomed out. It's a little bit, let's bring it up to 100% so you guys can see that. Okay, so job status is here. Now we have the job status here, and we've got information on here. So job status is going to be a named range using the data validation here, and it's going to be based on that job status right here. Okay, great. So we've got that. Now, also what I'd like to do is we understand that. And let's take a look at some of the job database. Now, this job info has to be saved somewhere, right? As we add more information, for example, if I want to put in the contact name of, let's say, Fred, again, Fred's a very popular guy, Fredders, right? I want that saved. So as soon as I save that update, and let's say I'm going to load something else and load it back in, I want to make sure that that name returns. And that's going to be saved right here inside here. So we've got a contact name right here. So all that information, job ID, job title, is going to be saved here. In case if there was a cover letter that got created, I want to save that right here. So I want to make sure that that gets saved as well. So we've got that cover letter. That's the one that we created. It's also going to be saved. So all we have to do is make sure that we save that. But the best way to do that, to save it easily and save us some code, is to map the data. If you look in this top row here, we've got a bunch of cells, cell B9, J15, G15, J5. Those are the same cells where the same data stayed here inside G7 or J7 here. So all that information gets mapped when we're going to use that very simply. All right, so notice we also have one other thing. We've got some information here. I want to know if there's a cover letter that's been saved. Notice this is B9. That is the cover letter. I'm going to put that here. As we created this cover letter, it had to get saved somewhere, right? It got saved in this location here. And I want that file path to appear in B9. So if we look in our jobs database, we see that cover letter is mapped to B9. So when we load this job, that entire file path is going to come into B9. And that's how we know. So when we load that job, if there's a value here, it's going to load the cover letter, just like we do here. So if there's a value in B9, it's going to load that cover letter. It's going to load it here as an object, that Word object inside Excel. I'll be showing you how to do that in just a moment. But let's take a look at some of the other information here. We've got a job ID. Notice each individual has a job ID. We have the row that's associated with the job. We're going to use match. We've done that before. We're using the match formula, and we're using a named range called job ID. So we go into the name manager, and we see job ID. Okay, this is a dynamic named range based on those IDs. So what I want to do is I want to extract the row, meaning I want to know that job ID 1 is on row 4, and we can use a match for that. So we're going to do just that. Using the match, we're matching whatever's in B3, job ID, and we want to add 3 because this in itself here, this will return 1 because it's the first value. But I don't want the first value. I want the first row. I want the row that it's held in. So we're going to add 3. If it's not found, it's just going to show blank because that would create an error. I also want to know the selected job row. As I select specific jobs here and here, I want this row to change. And notice we're going to use conditional formatting based on that. So when I select that and I go into the home and I go into conditional formatting and manage rules, we will see that there's a set of rules based on what is in B6. If the row is set to B6, I want to color this dark brown with white bold font, and it's going to apply to all the cells from D4 to D200. I've also got some alternating colors for alternating rows, and those are 2 conditions based on that. D4, notice there's no $ before 4. It's going to be all the rows that apply. And I want to color odd rows. Odd rows are going to give it this light brown, right? Whereas even rows here, even rows, which would be a 0, also making sure that there's a value in column D, it's going to give it a little bit lighter. And that's very easy, so that as we add data in here, automatically the conditional formatting will just set automatically. Okay. All right. So we've also got a clear filter here and a filter here. So there's a lot of cool things going on here. Okay. I want to know the cover letter path. What does that mean? Now let's take a look at this. Remember, we created 2 named ranges for our cover letters. One we created for the path and the other we created the name. When a user selects a cover letter, this is a data validation based on our cover letter names, right? Data validation based on the names of our cover letters that we created in the info section. I want to know the path of where this is located, right? I want to know that full path. I want to know that cover letter 3 is located here. So I want to extract that path. Basically, what I want to do is simply look this name up and extract the associated path with it. And I want to place that path directly inside B8. And we can do that using an index and match. So we're going to index here that cover letter path because it is that path that we want to extract. And also what we want to do is we want to know the row that's associated on that. We're going to use the match, whatever's in M2, that is our cover letter name. And we're going to use the cover letter name named range to locate it. And we want an exact match. And we want that specific column, that cover letter path column. Once we have that, it's going to pull that cover letter name. If there's an error, it's going to be blank. So we know that if this is not blank, that is the path of that cover letter. And that's really important because when I decide I want to load a specific cover letter, let's say there's a cover letter that has not been associated, I need to know inside the code what is the full path of that cover letter. So if I pull that up, it's going to pull that cover letter up and it's going to place it directly inside here. That cover letter is going to be placed here. So regardless, but we need to know that full path. So now we know where to get that full path, and that's going to come directly from here, B8. And we notice there's no cover letter associated with this particular job here, so that's no problem. And then also I want to know the email template row. Now email templates can be saved. If I click here, create the email, it's going to load in email templates. Now I've got, let's say I want to load in a cover email template. I've just got one saved. Cover letter, I need to know what row that's been saved on. Let's take a look inside the email templates. We got wrap text here if we want to show wrap text, but I really don't in this case, so I'm going to turn that off. And basically what I want to do is I've got email templates here, email names, different email names. I've got the subject and the message. So I want to know what row this email name is associated with. So again, I've got a named range. So we go into formulas and we see that we have email names, again, using the offset formula based on those. So again, like I want to know the row that's been associated. If I know that there's a row associated with this cover, I can then load in the subject and I can then load in the message in the appropriate cells. And that's what I want to do when I change it. When I make a change here, I want to load in anything and then I want to save it. So let's say I want to put in test subject here and test message here. I want to save that. If I save it, I want to make sure that gets saved to the database here. So if we look in the email templates here, we now have test subject and test message. So if I load it back in, let's go ahead and load one with nothing, which is the third template right here, which doesn't have any data. And then I load in the second one, which I just saved. I want to make sure that that comes back in. So that's all going to happen on a change event, right? When I make a change to R3, that's what I want to happen. But I only want to trigger that when we have a specific row that's set up here. So we're going to use mash to do that, based on whatever's in R3, which is that email template, email name, and we're going to add 2 because we want the row associated. That first row is row 3. So this is our second template, which is on row 4. Continuing down, we have some email documents, email and document variables. Now these are going to be very useful because when we create a template, we need to replace those variables with the actual data. So we see when we're showing that document here, we want to replace recipient name with the recipient name. Now we just open the Word. So now it's this open Word. So we can double click on it and open the Word if we want to. Or the company we want to replace with the actual company, right? And the first name of the person who's filling out the form, and the surname or last name, either way. So we want to make sure that we are going to do that with that. So we need those variables. So what we're going to do is we're going to loop through these variables. So I want the first name, in other words, wherever the first name is found, it could be in the email or in the document, I want to replace it with Sammy. Wherever the last name is found, I want to replace it with Smith. And that's just how we did inside the template. So for example, we'll do it again here. If I load this template in, cover letter 2, which is the one I've been using, right? And notice we have a default picture here. So we can load up that. And once it's loaded up, you'll see all we need to do is create cover letter, and all of that data is going to be replaced with the actual data. So I just click this button. It's going to automatically save that job and replace the now we don't have any data in here inside our company data, but our personal data got off. In other words, there's no company address. There's nothing in here. So if I change that company name, it would work just fine. So this company doesn't have any of that information. Okay, so what we want to do is I'll select this one because it's got all the data associated. What I want to do is I want to make sure that we have our personal information and then we have our company information. Now the personal information is simply linked to everything inside our info and settings. So it's simply linked to all the data here. So when this changes, it's automatically going to change here. So notice it's all based on the info and settings. Okay. So everything, I just justified it so it wouldn't bleed over into here, but we could easily add spaces. So for example, if you want to left justify it, let's justify it. And we don't want that bleeding into the other cells. All we need to do is just add space here. And then so dragging this space down and then it will stop that. So that's another way to do that. Okay, so otherwise we also have recipient information, right? The company or job information. I want to know the recipient name. So this is going to be linked to whatever's in G7. This is going to be linked to whatever's located here in G5, right? So we're just simply linking all the data. And the reason we want to do this in a single column is because when we need to create that Word document or when we need to create that email and we need to replace all those variables, all we need to do is just run a loop from 13 through 30. We're going to look for the first name. If it's found, we're going to replace it with Sally. It's very, very easy to replace tons of variables with just a tiny bit of code right in here. So that's why we put everything here in one column, because all we need to do is look for state anywhere in the document and replace it with California. Also, likewise, we also want to make sure that the format is set too. So we're going to also update formats and check for the format to make sure if there's any date formats or number formats that they get honored as well. So I'll show you how to do that coming up. Okay, so we understand everything in this panel here. Now let's go ahead and go back to this selection. I'll show you how we're going to do. Let's go with the create email. How do we load this? Is very simple. So if we do this, how do we load this information? It's going to be based on a worksheet change event based on R3. And that's on that specific sheet. So let's take a look inside our job macro here. It's actually our job info here, and it's going to be based on that change event, right? So we have a document template and we have an email template load. Let's look at that email template load first. Making a change to R3, we also want to make sure that B10 doesn't equal empty. Why is that so important? Well, B10 is going to let us know the row of that template. If B10 is empty, we don't know what row to associate. We don't know what row to load that subject or what row to load that message. So B10 is essential that it contains a value. So assuming that B10 does have a value, we could then load. It's very simple. Inside the email subject, which is P7, we're going to load whatever's in the email template sheet, column B, and whatever's in B10. I could easily have put this into a variable called email row, but that was just one less step, just easy. So this is our email row. So basically we're going to take whatever's in B10, whatever's in B in that email row, and we're going to place it directly in P7. And just to clarify, what that means is all we're going to be doing inside our email templates, whatever's in B is going to go directly inside this one right here, P7. Let's move that over here, P7. And also whatever's located in column C of that is going to go located in P9. So that's just all we're going to do to place that email data. Relatively simple, okay? And also what we're going to do is next one, let's do this one. What I like to do is I'd like to load this template. Remember, we're loading the template. Now this template can be loaded into two conditions, right? When a user makes a change to this one right here, I want to check for two things. One is, has there been a template? If there's already a cover letter saved, I want to load the cover letter. Whatever's been saved, I want to load it. However, if there's a job in which we have not created a cover letter for, it's important to know. So we want to load the template. So we're either going to load either the template, which looks like this, or we're going to load the actual cover letter if one was created. So we're going to show you how to do that. Just two things on this sheet that I'm going to show you, two small things on the sheet. One is simply create an email or show documents. And all we're doing here is we're hiding and showing columns. Let's take a look inside this. We have columns L through N here, okay? So all we're going to be doing is simply showing those columns L through N when we click show documents. Now when we click create email, we're going to hide columns L through N, and we're going to show columns O through R, and we're going to also show this button set here. This button set is called email group, so we're going to show all these buttons. And that's very, very simple inside the code. So let's take a look how we did that. And that's going to be called on job info screen macros. So the first thing we've got to do is we've also got hide jobs and show jobs. One more thing, that was a very, very quick macro here. You'll notice real quick, we have the ability to hide the jobs or show the jobs. So this macro simply is going to hide or show column D, and it's going to hide or show this button, the button called show jobs button. I want to show that, or I want to hide it, right? So we're just going to do that. And that's all that is. So it's a relatively simple macro. And we're going to use the same macro, hide, show jobs, for both. That means it is the same macro that's either hiding or showing those jobs. So all we need to do is know what condition are we in. If column DD, if the column is currently hidden is true, that means it's hidden, we know that we need to show the jobs. We need to show them, right? It's currently hidden, so we must show them. To do that, we want to do it right here. We know if it's currently hidden like it is now, then we need to show it. If it's currently displayed, then we need to hide it. So we're just going to use the column visible to know what the current status is. So do that. We just check. If we want to show the jobs, then we're going to do show jobs button. We're going to visible equals false, right? We don't need to show that jobs button, but we do need to show the hide jobs button. So that's going to be made visible. And then I want to make sure to show those columns. Column D, I want to make sure that hidden equals false, meaning we're going to show that column. Else, we're going to hide the jobs, simply the opposite. In this case, we're making the button show jobs visible. We're hiding the hide button. And then we're going to actually make sure that column D is then hidden. That's all we need to do for the show hides. Okay, what about the show email? Relatively simple, right? This time, if we're going to be showing the email, we need to show a few things. The first thing is with job info, that's our sheet. We're going to show that email group. We want to make sure that is displayed. I also want to hide the create cover letter button, right? That create cover letter button should only be displayed. This button right here, let's go ahead and show the documents. This button here, I want to make sure that this is hidden. This is called the create cover letter button. I want to make sure that that button's hidden. When we're adding those emails, that button's going to be hidden. These buttons are going to be displayed. So how are we going to do that? Well, it's just simply hiding and showing those shapes and the columns as well. So the columns would be L through N, hidden equals true. We're going to hide those columns. Also, I want to also want to show columns O through R. Those columns must be displayed to show the email. And lastly, P3, I'm going to take on G9. I want to set the default to email. I think that's kind of a nice feature. If we're going to be adding, let's pull a job that has an email. I didn't add any job data, probably should have, but that's okay. So this particular job has an email. Notice that we've got Fredders at Fredders Drugs. So when I create a new email, I want to make sure that whatever email is located in G9 is also moved over here to P9, right? So if I double click on here, it's going to create a link for that. So I want to make sure that it's sent there. So we just do that. We're going to set that default email. And we're going to use this line of code right here. P3 is going to equal there. Set the default email too. Once we have that, I also want, in case there's any document preview, what is that doc preview shape? That is the name of the shape that I've created for this. So when we show docs, this particular Word document is shape as well, and it's called document preview. It's an embedded object, and it's called document preview. It's given the same name. So when I create the email, certainly I don't want to show that. I want to hide that. So we make sure if it exists. If it doesn't exist, it could create an error. So we want to wrap that in on error resume next, and that's just what we did here. We wrapped it in on error resume next and on error go to 0, but we're going to hide that. We're going to hide that document. Now the show docs is going to be just basically the opposite, right? We want to, in this case, hide the email group, but we're going to show the cover letter button. We are going to show columns L through N, and we're going to hide columns O through R. And again, this time what we're going to do is we're going to show the document preview. Again, we're going to wrap it in on error resume next and on error go to 0 in case it doesn't exist, but we want to make sure to display that. That's all we need to do. Okay, great. So we saw another, and let's continue down with these macros. I've got two more macros, small macros on this particular module, and that's going to allow us to filter jobs, right? So if I, again, as I showed you before, if I want to put in staff, right, I want to make sure that the job title, only the staff assistant job is going to be showing up here, right? So how are we going to do that? I should probably clear out the selected row too, so I'll get to that. I want to clear out that selected rows based on B6. When we run a filter, we should clear out that selected row. Okay, so how are we going to do that? Well, that's going to be based on a change of G or J. In either one of those cases, I want to make a change. We're going to use an advanced filter, right? I want to filter based on job title. I want to filter based on search company. Now notice here in our jobs database, we've got our data. I want to search based on job title or company. So we need to set up some criteria for that. And I've done just that here. So I've set up some criteria based on the job title. So, but I want to wrap it in wildcard, meaning I want a wildcard asterisk before and after that. That way, it just simply contains it, right? So if I don't get the entire name just right, I still want it to show up. For example, if I only put in staff as a staff assistant, I still want this job to show up. So when I click on staff here, when I enter staff here, I want to make sure that we search any job that contains the word staff. To do that, we're going to put wildcards on the criteria both before and after it, just like this. So it's going to appear just like this. So this criteria is simply linked to what is in G3. But before we do that, we're going to add an asterisk before and an asterisk after. We're going to do the same thing with company, but this one's going to be based on J3, right? This one's G3 and this one's J3. We're going to put an asterisk before and after it. This becomes our criteria. Then our results come here. So how are we going to do that? Well, the best way to do that is just simply create an advanced filter. Run our criteria, which is automatic. Having those results here, we don't necessarily need job ID, just thought it might be helpful. Determining the last row, and then all we need to do is just bring in that information and bring it directly inside here. So how are we going to do that? Well, that's just a little bit of code. And then what we're going to do is I want another macro called clear. Clear is simply going to make sure that this is clear And we're going to make sure this is clear and rerun the macro. So we're going to go in opposite order. First, we're going to run the filter, then we're going to do the clear filters. Clear filters here, jobs filters here. This is the macro that's going to run when we make a change. So if we take a look inside our job info sheet here, we see that we're going to make a change, search by job or company. If we're making a change, worksheet change event to either G3 or J3, and we want to make sure that the target value does not equal empty. If that, we're going to run the macro called jobs filter. It is this macro, jobs filter, that we're going to run. So the first thing we want to do is determine the last row. And then we also want to determine the last row, last results row, both of them in long variables. And I also want to make sure that any jobs are automatically cleared from D4 through D99. I want to clear all of those jobs out so that we're ready for the next filter. So D4 through all the way down is going to be cleared out. Any job, simply just deleting it's going to do that. And also I mentioned to you, I want to clear out the selected row, right? Look here inside B6. So we should do that right now because I want to make sure that when we clear it out, B6 should also be cleared. So simply adding B6 onto that, that means that selected row is automatically going to be cleared. Okay, so great. So now we're going to focus on the job database. Now we want to determine the last row of the job database, right? We're going to be filtering, so we need to know the last row. If the last row is less than 3, that means we have no data and we need to exit out of the sub. Then we're ready to run our advanced filter. This is going to be a very basic advanced filter. We don't need to encompass all the data because we're just filtering out the basics. So all we need to do is just probably go from A all the way to company and down, right? So I'm just going to filter out this. The rest of it is not important because we only really need to extract the job title. That's it. So I'm going to run advanced filter from A through A3 through C in the last row. We're going to have our criteria come here from Q2 all the way through R3. And then our results are going to be in A2 through AB2, AA2 through AB2. So that's just we have inside that advanced filter right here. So it's going to be A3 through C in the last row. Advanced filter is going to be Q2 through R3. And we're going to run, our results going to come from AA through AB2, unique equals true. Going to get those results. We're going to check on the last row of the results based on column AA. If the last one is less than 3, then we're going to exit the sub. Then all we need to do is simply bring over the results from D4 through D in the last row plus 1. We're adding 1 because our rows start here on row 4 here, but in our results they start in row 3. So right, we need to compensate for that one last row. So that's going to bring over all of the jobs. So that's it. Now to clear the filter out, remember that button here is tied to clear filter. I've got 2 little icons here inside our job info screen right here. It's kind of hard. It's a little trash can and a filter. Probably not the best icon, but it works. So this is going to be our clear filter. When I do that, all I want to do is make sure this is clear and this is clear. If I know these 2 fields are clear and then I run the same exact macro, we know that it's going to automatically change this to double asterisk and double asterisk. So that means any value here is going to show up. So to do that, all we need to do is just do that and then run the macro. So all we need to do is just clear those 2 fields, then run the job filter again. Relatively simple. Okay, very, very good. So that's really cool. I want to show you another macro, right? I've got a few macros here. This one's going to be called show document preview. As you've seen a few times that I did inside the job info, I want to be able to show either the actual cover letter here, or I want to show the template, right? We can zoom out. We don't need it that big. And so what I want to do is I want to show this, right? So when I show the documents here, or I create the email, I want to show that template. This got moved up. All right, there we go. Just reset that. We're showing all the columns there. We don't need to show all the columns and all the shapes. When we make a change to M3, we want something to happen. What do I want to happen? I either want to load the actual cover letter that got created, or if it's on another job where there's no cover letter, in that case, I want to load the template itself, right? So the template itself. So how are we going to do that? Well, that's going to be based on a change called M2. That's the cell there, M2. And it's going to run that macro that we just had, document preview. So when we look inside our job info screen and we take a look at M2, this document template load. If the user makes a change to M2, and we also want to make sure that B8 does not equal empty, What do I mean by B8? Why is that important? Well, we take a look at B8. If we remember, that is our template row here, right? B8 is located here. It is our long path, right? Remember, we're going to extract that path from that. So I need to know that path. That's very important. Also, we need to check here, is B9 exists? But first, we need to make sure that we actually have a template. So that's very important to make sure. So as long as B8 is not blank, then we can go ahead and load it up. So that's what we're going to do. So how do we load that document? Well, we're going to use this macro right here called show document preview. And that's the one we were just in right here, show document preview. We're going to first dimension the jobs folder. I need to know what folder it's going to be in. We're going to place it in. And I also need to know the document folder is a string. What is the file name and the file path? That's important. We're going to focus on job info. First thing what I want to do is if there's any current document, when I make a change, right, I want to make sure to delete the first one. Anytime we change, if I decide I want to change a different template, I want to make sure that we're deleting the current one and going to place the other one. So to do that, the first thing to do, if it doesn't exist, it would create an error, and therefore we've wrapped it in on error resume next, and on error go to 0. So we're going to delete any existing template, delete any existing, let's put document, it may not be a template, and just put document. All right, so next up, we're going to set that job folder that's based on our info screen E3. Remember, we browse for that. And then what we're going to do is we're going to add a backslash onto that. That's our shared document folder. Let's just call it our document folder, right? Our main document folder, because we have subfolders in that. Once we have our main document folder, I want to make sure that it is correct, right? Make sure that it is the correct path. To do that, we're going to check it here. If the directory of the job folder equals empty, or perhaps the job folder only equals the backslash. This could happen if this is empty and we add this, it's only going to be the backslash. So in that case, I'm going to let the user know, please select a job folder or set a jobs folder. And then what we're going to do is we're going to run that macro browser. We're going to help them by running that macro again. We're going to make a second check. If the directory jobs folder equals empty or the job folder still, then we're going to exit the sub, right? If they still did not manage to browse for a folder and set a folder, then we're just going to exit the sub. Okay, we're going to turn off screen application updating to false, right? We're going to do that. That's going to make things faster and a little bit easier on us. Also, what I want to do is I want to check what is located. Is B9 does not equal empty, right? I want to know, remember, this is very important. Taking a look inside our column B here, remember, if it's been saved, if we've created a saved, it's going to be in B9. If it's just the template, it's in B8. Remember, B9 is going to come directly from here, right? If we've created a cover letter, it's already saved. It's going to be located right here, and it's going to come directly when we load that job. It's going to come directly in B9, right? If I select here, we see that B9, and I'm loading this job, now contains that whole path. So if it does, then we're going to load this document. If B9 is empty, then we're going to load the cover letter. So we need to know which one to load. We need to differentiate between those two file paths. So if B9 does not equal empty, then the file path is going to be in B9. It's the generated cover letter. It's already been created. Else, has not been, the file path is going to become whatever's in B8. That's why that file path in B8 is so important. Okay, so now we've created a file path, either one that's been created already, or we're going to use the template. Now what we want to do is we want to make sure that that file path is correct. So you're going to use the directory command, file path, VB directory. If it's empty or the file path itself is empty, then we're going to exit the sub. We're going to exit on a missing document. Now what we want to do is we want to create a Word document inside Excel. Right? I want to create that Word document just as we did. So we're going to use the OLE objects. We're going to add an object. Okay, and what kind of object? It's going to be the file path based on this file path, right? That file path is going to be our Word document. We don't want to link it. We don't want to display it as an icon, and we want to give it a specific name, document preview. So this is going to load that Word. Now it's been loaded, but it hasn't been placed yet. First thing I want to do is with that shape, I want to lock the aspect ratio. That's so it doesn't get skewed. I want to place that top left position in L3, and these two lines are going to do that. That means when we create that document or load that document, it's always going to be placed directly inside L3. I want it right there. Also, you're looking at this cork background. How did I do that? Well, that's just basically a picture background. So if we go into the page layout and I delete the background, you see it's been deleted. And if I go back in here and add a page, right, and I have that page, I've got it here in this cork board here. It's just a wallpaper that I did. So it's just a really cool wallpaper. So that's all that is. Okay, so going back, I want to place it directly. The top left position is always going to be in L3. That way it's going to have the same position. And that's when we do that inside the code. L3, the top position, the left position. That's it. That's all we have to do to open it up. And then don't forget to turn on application screen updating. So that's a very, very easy code. That's all we have to do to place that Word document directly in here. Okay, cool. So we've been over that. Now let's go quickly over saving jobs. This is not an integral part of it, but basically when I want to save jobs or new job or delete a job, this one I should be creating this. I'll do this in Patreon. I didn't get to this code yet. No code assigned. You could try it yourself. That'd be great. Deleting job. I think I did. Let's just take a look here. I think I may have created a macro for it. We should check. And let's take a look and assign the macro, right? Job delete. Okay, I did. Good enough. All right, so let's save our work. So basically, I've got a few macros that are going to allow us to save the job, load a job when I click on here, create a new job, and delete a job. So let's go over those unique macros. They're very simple, so we're going to go quickly over them. The job macros are located here. Adding a new job, all we need to do is, first of all, I want to make sure that any document that got created gets deleted, just like we did before. Then I've got a named range called job data. This job data is based on all the job data. So if I go into formulas, name manager, and I go to job data, we're going to see those dancing ants around that job data. It's basically all the data here inside here. So all of that data is going to be associated. All those cells are associated. So we see the job data. It's going to be based on all those cells. So basically it allows us to clear all those cells out very, very simply there. So that's based on the job data. So first thing I want to do is clear all that out. And then I want to clear a few additional cells out. I also want to clear out B9 and B3, clear the job ID and the selected row, very important. And also I want to select G5. That's going to ensure that just as soon as we do that on the add new, we want G5 so that the user can start putting in a job title or position directly in G5. Okay, once we have that, that's all we need to do. What I want to do is I want to save and update. Now it's the same macro, whether we're saving it, a new one, or we're updating it is the same macro. All we need to do to differentiate that, if it is a new job, we know that there's no row associated with that job. And so we want to make sure that the job row is blank because there's no job ID. So we know that there's no job row. If there's no job row, we know it's going to be a new one. If it's an existing job row, we know the row's here. So B4 is going to tell us whether it is an existing job or a new job. Okay, so to do that, we're going to base it on that. But first thing we want to make sure is that we have some required fields. G5, that is our job title. We want to make sure that that is not empty. If it is, please let the user know. Also, if B4 is empty, remember, we know it's a new job. Then it's a new job, right? If it's else an existing job, B4 would have value. If it's a new job, what do I want to do? Well, I want to assign it a brand new ID, and I want to give it a brand new row. The next ID, the next job ID is going to be based on a max formula, and that's going to be set right here. This next one right here, located in B5. We're going to use the max formula based on all the job IDs plus 1. So that's going to set a brand new job ID, one more than all the job IDs. So notice it's 4 because we currently have 3, 1, 2, and 3 jobs. So the next one's going to be 4. So the first thing what I want to do is place that job both in A7 here, which is the next available row, and I also want to place it directly inside B3. So we're going to do that just inside the code. So to do that, we're going to take that job row, setting that up to the first available row based on our jobs database. This is going to get us the first available row. Next up, I want to set that job ID in 2 places. One, it's going to be placed in B3, coming from B5, and also we're going to place it in column A. Just those 3 things that we're going to do for new jobs. That's only for new jobs. However, for existing jobs, all we need to do is extract that row from B4. That's all we need to do. Now, for either new or existing jobs, all we're going to do is we're going to run a loop from 2 to 14, and we're going to map that data. So in this case, all we're going to do is run a loop for each column in that. We're going to look to this cell, and I'm going to look inside G5. Whatever's in G5 here, I'm going to place directly inside column 2. So we're going to do that all the way from 2 all the way to 14, looking in J5, placing it here, looking in G7, placing it here. So we're going to loop from 2. We're not starting at 1 because our job ID has already been placed. So we're going to bring it all the way here, all the way to the last row from the 14th column. This is column 14 here. That's all we have to do to save that data to the database. And then all I want to do is run a saved message. All that saved message is, you may have seen it when we placed it here. When I saved it, it was that fade out message. So As soon as I save, it was pretty quick on this one, save and update, you'll see job saved right up here. I'll do that again. Job saved. See that little green marker right here? I just wanted to let the user know that the job has been saved without him having to click on an OK. So we're going to do this, run this timer, run this loop, and it's going to slowly fade out that message until it's completely gone, running through a timer, and then it's going to delay. And then we're going to show it visible equals false. So that's all we have to do. Relatively simple. You can just copy and paste this. On job load, it's very, very simple. All we're going to do is the opposite of we did on save. Basically the opposite. When I load a job, I need to place the ID here. I need to know the selected ID. That ID is going to come from here. This ID of the selected job is right here. This is job ID 1. I'm extracting out. We're going to use an index and indirect. So basically, we're going to look up. I'm going to look up that job ID. I want to return the job ID, but I'm going to look up the job title, and I'm going to look it up from D using the indirect and whatever row that's been selected. That row is in B6. So D in B6 is going to return our job name. We're going to run a match through the job title here, and then we're going to return a row. That row is going to be used on the index, so it's going to return that row. All I'm going to do is take that row here and place it directly up here. So when I select on the job, I want it to load. That's based on selection change. So let's see how we do that. Inside the job info here, based on worksheet selection change, if the user makes any selection between D4, and also we want to make sure that D contains a value. If it's not empty, then we can move forward. First thing what we want to do is I want to take that row and I place it directly inside B6. I want to check B7. If it equals empty, then let the user know, please select the job from the list. If it is not, and we're going to exit the sub. If it's not empty, B7 is going to take that job ID, right? That's based on the selected. I'm going to move that to B3. Once it gets moved to B3 here, that job row is going to automatically be generated. Then I know that job row. Then I can run the macro that we're going to run. That next macro is called job load. Job load right here. That is the macro that we're going over right now called job load. First of all, we're going to delete any preview that might exist. We're going to clear all the job data here using that named range of job data. We're going to make sure that B4 isn't empty. If it is, we're going to let the user know to please select a job from the list. Assuming that it's not empty, we can then put that into a variable called job row. Running that loop again, but this time bringing the data from the jobs database, using that map data into there. That's it. That's all we have to do. Then what I want to do is I want to load the correspondence history. This is not something we talked about a lot, but this is the correspondence, right? This is the correspondence database, right? So here what I want to do is I want to run all the correspondences, emails, calls, or whatever, based on job ID 1. So we're going to use a criteria and another advanced filter. That criteria is based on a link to B3 in the job info. That way we can show the job ID. We're going to have those results appear here, and then those results are going to come directly over inside our job info here, bringing that in. Notice that this particular one here is a merge cell. So this takes on 2 columns. So when we do that, when we have something brought into a merge cell 2 columns, we need to make sure that we compensate for that. So notice that we have a blank column here. When we have a blank column in our results here, we also want to make sure that there's a blank column in our original data. Otherwise, it's going to create an issue. So we want to make sure that we run our advanced filters, always going to go to N. Our criteria is going to be R2 through 3, and our results are going to come from U2 through Y. And so the first thing we want to do is certainly make sure we clear out any results that might be here if they haven't already been cleared out. But job info takes care of that. Our job data takes care of that. We've already done that when we cleared out the job data up here. That took care of it right here. So what we're ready to do is going to get that last row on the correspondence database. This is going to focus on with the correspondence database. We're going to get that last row running an advanced filter. We're going all the way to column N, and then we're going to have the results come through U2 through Y2, and with a criteria of R2 through R3. We're going to check to make sure we have some results based on column U. If we don't have any results, we're going to exit the sub, and then all we need to do is bring in that data, just like this job range F19 through J in the last results row, plus 16, right? We're starting on row 19 here. We're coming from row 3 here. There's a 16 row difference, so we must add 16 to our destination right here. Okay, that's it. And now what I want to do, the last part of load, if B8 doesn't equal empty, then we're going to show the document. We want to run the cover preview, but only if B8 does not equal empty. So let's take a look inside here. I want to make sure that B8 isn't empty, or even in B9. If it is, B9 would also take it in. So notice that we have B8 and B9. I'm going to change this to B9 so we could load the template, or we could load this. I'm going to change that to B9 because I like that better. So that should be changed to B9. It's going to be the same result though, but I want to make sure if there is a saved one, we're going to show that preview when we load it in, because we delete it automatically up here, but we need to show it up here. So if there's one that's been saved with the job, it's going to show. Otherwise, it's not. Nothing's been saved here. Something has been saved here, so we want to make sure to show it here. I like that. That looks really good. That's how we load the job information. Okay, great, but how do we get this really cool automated text in here from that? Well, that's going to be creating a Word document, creating that dynamic template with the dynamic content. So let's go ahead and go through that and see how that's done. That was last. The last one is job delete that we didn't go over just yet. All we're going to do is extract the row from B4. And then we're just going to delete it. That's pretty much it. Relatively simple. Then we're going to run add a new job, which just clears out all the content. Okay, so let's get into the cool part now. Also the Word macros. I want to know Word macros. Then we're going to go through email macros, and then that's going to be it. Great. So how do we do this? How do we create this? And what am I going to be doing? Let me just show you exactly what we're going to be doing. What I want to do is, if I have a job here, let's pull this job out. We don't have any template. And I've got a template here, right? I want to take this template and I want to place it with dynamic data. Again, I went over this one, but I just want you to see it before we create that macro. All I'm going to be doing is clicking here. We don't have, let's put in some contact name. Let's put in a company contact name. Let's put in David Davidson. And then we'll put an email here, david@david.com. Okay, and the street address 1234 Main Street, and that's enough requirements. Phone, we're good to go with that. Okay, so I'm going to save that, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to create that contact letter, and it's going to take both the personal information and the company information. It's going to automatically create that document. So notice it's all been created based on this, and we don't have a city. That's why this is 0, but we could probably add some code. So that's all we need to do. So we could, how do we do that? Well, that's with this macro right here. That is the same macro that's assigned to this, right? Called create letter. And that's the macro we're going to go over right now, called create letter. First thing we want to do is I want to develop a constant. This is going to be for our Word document, replace all. We're going to use that as 2. Okay, that's our only constant. I want to set a job folder as a string, document name, document path, template, job title, and company all as strings, along with the variable format, our variable name, and our variable value, profile picture, all as strings as well. We're going to use late binding. That's really important, right? You know, sometimes you get the library doesn't exist. Here inside our references, notice there's no Word document, right? This is very important. It avoids error. So when you're programming, I really try to do this. When you're giving out your applications, I have not selected a Word document. What I mean by Word document is, if you look down here under Microsoft Word, all the way down here, early binding is necessary when you do that to do, let's take a look here, Word. This will be this one right here, Microsoft Word Object 14, 16, or whatever it is, right? I'm using an older version, but so what I don't want is for the end user, when you hand this, I don't want them to have to find this, look for it, and hope it is. So that would be early binding. You mean this is required. This is not required because we're using late binding, okay? So we usually generally don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. So to do that, we're going to bind that application inside our code. We're just going to call Word application as an object and Word document as an object, just as like we do when we do email object or email app, okay? First of all, we're going to mention the variable row as long, right? I want that as long. Why is that important? Because we're going to loop through those variables. We'll be getting into that. I want to make sure that B8 contains a value. I need to have that cover letter template. That template's located in B8. Without that full file path of that template, we cannot continue. I also want to make sure that there's a job title and company before then. That's going to be part of our file path, right? When we create that file name, let's take a look inside here, here, and here. I want those get created. I want these folders, these individual folders, to contain the company name and the position. Notice these folders contain company name and the position. And the documents that created also the company name and the position. So that company name and the position that we're applying for are very important. So we want to make sure that that data is valid, right? So I want to make sure that we have a title and we have a company name. So G5 and J5 are both required. So we're going to let the user know if either one of those are blank. If G5 equals empty or J5 equals empty, then please make sure to save a job title and company before creating a cover letter. And we're going to exit the sub out. Okay, the first thing what I want to do is check for accurate job folder. I want to check, that's a very important, checking for that we have a proper job folder and located in the info. So info E3 / we went over this once before. There's a few times we're going to go over it. Could create a class on this. Directory job folder, making sure that it's not blank or that it doesn't just contain the /. If it is, let the user know and run the macro. We went through this already. Picture profile, we're setting that picture profile. Remember, that's the picture profile picture that the user browsed for, and we place it inside E4. Remember, that went inside E4 right here. That is that file path for Sally's profile picture located in E4. So we want to make sure that that is, because it is that. One other thing inside this, let's pull up a Word template. Inside this Word template, cover letter 2, right? Let's take a look inside this. This is inside Word. I want to let you know we've got this cool profile picture, but it is this picture that we're going to be changing, right? So what I did is I made sure that regardless of the template, I wanted to give it the same name. So if we look inside our layout right here and we do selection pane, we see that the name of this picture is called profile picture. For regardless of the template, I've given it this name. That way we can call out much easier. Just like we would if we had a shape in Excel, this shape also has a name. If I know the name of the shape, then I know the name. So if we take a look at, let's take a look at one here, same thing, right? This one, I didn't use a default picture, but it's the same thing. If we check layout, selection pane, I also called this profile picture. Okay, so now that we know that the profile picture is always going to have the same name, it's going to help us in code. So that way we can change the picture just as we would inside Excel. Okay, so getting back inside our code, we've got that profile located in E4. We're going to check to make sure that that profile is accurate. If the VB directory is empty, meaning there's something wrong with the file, we're going to set that profile picture, that string variable, to be empty just in case. I'm going to set the job title based on G5, the company based on J5. I want to know the template path. That's going to be B8. That's the path of that template. Just a refresher, B8 is our template here, and it's coming directly from our template path right here. So these are our template paths. That's where it's coming from. And we need to know that because we're going to have to pull up that template path. We're going to have to customize it. Then we're going to have to save those changes as a different file name. I also want to create a document name. Now, the document name is going to be used for both the name of the template, the name of the cover letter, and the folder as well. So that's going to be the company name, an underscore, and the job title. So we're going to use both that for the document name and the folder name, right? I want a separate folder for every single job. That's going to keep things nice and organized, okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to check for the job folder and we're going to create as needed, right? Does a job folder exist? If it doesn't, then please create it. So that's what we're going to do with this line of code. If directory, the job folder, and the job document name, right, it's inside there. So we're going to combine both the job folder and the document name. Does that folder exist? If it's equal to empty, that means it does not exist. Then we're going to create that directory. MK directory, otherwise known as make directory. We want to make that directory. So we're going to do that with just this line of code. Make directory, job folder, and document. That's what creates that brand new folder. Then what I want to do is I want to create a full path, right? We want to create that new Word document and we want to create a path for it. So that path is going to be put into a string variable here. It's going to be the job folder plus the document name, and then we're going to put a / onto that. Once again, the document name here and .docx. That's going to create that full document path. So that way, as soon as we customize that template, we can then save it as that new name. That way, it will not disturb the original template. Okay, now we're ready to open that Word document. Okay, so we're going to do on air resume next. We do need to check to see if Word is running or not. So we're going to set the Word app to get object, right? We're going to get it. If it's not running, this is going to create an error. So we know that if error number does not equal 0, there was an error that was created. That means it's not running. Then what we want to do is we want to create that word op. So we're going to clear the error. And then what we're going to do is we're going to set that word op. We're then going to create the word application because we've checked here. It's not running. So now we want to create it. So we can do that just with the error. Set the word app equals create object word application. This is that late binding here. We're setting the word app right here and not up at the dimension, right? So we're late binding this, creating it here. All right, now if the work is running, now on error resume next. Okay, on error go to 0. Now what we say, I'm decided just for this training, I didn't want the word application to be visible. In other words, while I'm creating it, I don't want to make that word application visible. If you do want to make it visible, which you certainly could, just uncomment this out. Then the whole application will become visible when we create it. Otherwise, you can comment it out, right? For us, we have that word application. We have it. It's already inside Excel, right? We are showing it here, so we really don't need it visible inside the word application itself. So but you can do that if you like. All right, so continuing on. Now what I want to do is I want to create the document. All we've done is create the application or set the application, but now we need to create and open the document itself. So we can do that here. Setting the document, that Word document, being the Word application that we just created, based on the documents, we're going to open it. We're going to open it based on the template path. Remember, we're opening that template path. We want to make changes to it, so read only is going to be false. We want to open and make changes to that template. Once we've done that, we're going to check the profile. I want to add that profile picture. It's very simple, just as it is in Excel. Assuming it's not nothing, right? We want to make sure that the profile picture exists. Then we're going to use Word document, shapes, just as we do in Excel, profile picture, because we know the name of that shape. We're going to fill it, user picture, profile picture, exactly as it is in Excel, except for this part, right? So this part's exactly like it is in Excel, except this part we're associating with a document as opposed to a sheet. But that's it. So we're going to set the profile picture, set profile picture. Okay, so now that we set the profile picture, now what we want to do is I want to loop through all the variables, right? I want to look inside that template. I want to find those, any of the associated templates. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete this one here. We've created it. I'm going to delete this, right? And then what I want to do is I want to load that template again. Since there's no created, I'm going to load that template. So what I want to do is I want to look for anything that's called recipient name or company or full name or anything like that. And I want to replace it with that. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a loop, and we have a variable row from 13 all the way to 30. We're going to look for first name and we're going to replace it with Sally. And we're going to do that through every single variable here. And that's just what we're going to do inside the code. So we're going to create that loop starting right here. Starting the variable row for the variable row equals 13 to 30. Loop through all the variables. We're going to set the variable name in from column A in the variable row. Determine the variable name. What is the value of that row? We're going to set that in this string called variable value. I also want to know the format. What is the format? Maybe we have dates or number formats or currency formats or dollar formats or whatever. So we're going to extract the format. That format's going to be whatever format is in here. So I'm going to extract that format. So if this phone format is like this, or it's a dollar or date format, I want to extract the format of the cell, and I want to put that format inside a variable. So we can do that with this line of code. So variable formats equal to dot range B and the number format of that cell. We're setting the format. It is that's important because then we can apply that format inside the Word document so that the dates and things get applied for it. Now that we've created that Word document, we can work specifically with that Word document. So with the Word document, we're going to look for all the content using content find. And what I want to do is I want to look through the entire content of that Word document. And what I want to do is I want to look for something. I want to look for anywhere it says those variable names inside the text. I'm looking for that. And I want to replace it. What do I want to replace it with? I want to replace it with the variable value. But I just don't want to replace it with that value. I want to set the format of that based on that. So we can use two things. We can use format or we can use application worksheet function text. Now keep this in mind. This may not work with different language packs, so keep that in mind. Format sometimes works as well. So application worksheet function text variable value, we're going to set whatever the format is. So this is going to apply. This is going to replace that. And then all we need to do is actually tell it to make those replacements. With this, execute the replace. And we're going to replace all. So what this is do is find and replace all instances of this variable name with this value here with this format. And that's all we have to do. Okay, so now that all the text has been replaced inside that Word document, now what we want to do is we want to save it as that. However, if that path, if that exact name in that exact folder already exists, I want to make sure that we're going to delete it first, right? So I don't get an error. So to do that, we're going to kill any document, meaning delete any document with the exact same path. If it doesn't exist, it could create an error. So we want to wrap it in on error resume next, and on error go to 0. Okay, now what I want to do is I want to save that. So we're going to create two things. We can create a PDF just like this inside that, and we can save the document. So we can do both, creating it in a PDF format, which is great for that. So the Word document, save that, right? We're going to export as a fixed format just as we do in Excel. That output file name is going to be that document path. We're going to export the format as a Word document. We can also use a PDF, Word doc, export format PDF. We can also do Word document, save as a document path, saving it as a document path. Then we can just close it. We don't need to save it now, false, because we've already saved it up here. Closing it, and then we can quit the entire Word application. That's going to close that entire Word application. This closes the document itself. This closes the Word application. Okay, now we've created that. Now all I want to do is make sure that we update B9. Remember, B9 is going to take on that cover letter. So when I save that, I want to make sure that B9 takes that on. And then last thing we want to do is I want to save that update. That's going to ensure that that document path that we just put in B9, that gets saved inside the database right here. So when I click on this create cover letter, it's going to take that, open that Word document, make all those changes, create that update, and it's also going to save it inside our JS database. So right here, this now took on that entire path, right? As you see, this path was taken, completely done, and it's been put directly in that path, and that's where the document now resides. Then what I want to do is I want to actually run the macro that we already created that's going to preview that. So the last thing inside this macro is that macro job show document preview. It is that one that I want to run. So when I run that, let's escape out of there, getting rid of this extra text. We don't need that. It's going to only create problems for us. So job information. So now what I want to do is I want to display that document that we just created. So that does it with the macro that we've already done. So we're running that document preview, that macro here, updates the preview of the template with the actual document that we created. Very, very cool. Okay, cool. One more macro to show you pretty much. This is the macro that we're going to allow us to create this really cool automated email cover letter. We also have variables in that. So when I create an email, I also want to add attachments to this. So if I click here, I want to add an attachment. Maybe we want to add some job files here, some documents here. There's nothing in here. There we go. Nothing in there. Okay, so maybe we want, we got stuff in here. All files, I'll update that. I want to add some files to that. So how are we going to do that? Well, the best way to do that is to be able to add multiple attachments, right? So maybe we have multiple attachments. We want to add a cover letter. Maybe we have an application that we've created. So to do that, I want to be able to add multiple. And notice I've just added two. This is the first one here. This is the second one, and they're separated by commas. So the first thing what I want to do is I want to be able to add attachments. I want to place them directly inside here. So how are we going to do that? Well, that's inside the module called emails, and we're going to focus on those macros now, and that's the last macros. So the first thing I want to do is save template. Well, I think we went over this one. Saving template, all we're going to be doing in this one is determining the template row. If it's a brand new template row, we're going to be setting that first available row. B10 is going to hand that template row. Remember correctly, B10 is going to let us know based on this template, based on this, is it a new template or not? Email template row. If this is a value, we know it's already has a count. If we decide we want a new template, we can do that. Just have a new template. Okay, so we have our templates here. We saved it in here. So that's simply going to save this information, saving anything, any changes that we make in B and C. All we're going to do is when we click that save button, all it's going to do is make changes, saving the name, saving the subject, and saving the message here. That's all we need to do with that. That's relatively simple. Okay, but continuing on, I want to add attachments. Remember, you saw me add multiple attachments to a single email, and it's actually unlimited. So how do we do that? Well, the first thing what we want to do is I want to make sure that they get saved with the same name, and I want to make sure they get added. So that means when I add it, it could be from everywhere, right? We don't know where they're going to browse for those attachments. It could be the desktop or whatever. So I want to make sure that they go directly to the right folder. Those attachments need to go into the specific folder for this job to keep everything organized. They need to go for the position and for the company. So again, we need to extract those variables. I need to get the job folder, of course, that's going to be an E3, making sure that it exists, and also making sure that we have both a company name and job title. We went over that already. Those are required. We need to have both of those. And I also want an accurate job folder. Again, checking to make sure we did that already. No need. So we did it up here. Don't need to do it again. Okay. Check for accurate job folder. That's done twice. Don't need to do that twice. But I do need a job title. That's going to come from G5. And I do need a company. That's going to come from J5. These are going to form our folder just as we did before. The document name, combining the company and combining the job title. This is going to combine them. Again, we're going to make sure that that folder exists. I want to make sure, checking to make sure that the company folder exists just as we did before. Now we're going to set the email ATT. This email ATT we're going to be setting right here. This is all up here. Right up here as a file dialog here. So setting that up as a file dialog, we're going to set that email as a file picker, right? File picker, and it could be any type of file. So it just says, please select a file to attach. So let's update that text there. File could be any type of file to attach. So now that we've given them instructions, right? And again, we want any file. We're going to be able to add all the files. We should probably clear out these filters before. That's why it didn't come up. So adding those files, adding any type of file, allowing multi-select as false. If they don't select anything, we're going to no selection. But if they do select something, I'm going to separate it. I want to know, one, the file name based on the directory of the select items, and I want to know the full file path. Okay. Now what I want to do is I want to copy that location from wherever it's located into the jobs folder. Now, in case if we're going to use on-air resume next, in case it already exists in that folder, in case we're browsing directly from that folder. So we want to copy it. I want to run a copy. I want to copy that file path from its current location into its new location, job folder, document name, backslash, and the file name. That's why that file name, we're keeping that file name the same. So that's going to copy that file from wherever it's located into that specific folder for that job and for that company. Once we have that, what I want to do is I want to add it to the attachments. However, I want to add a comma to separate it in case there's already a value there. So I want to check, is something exist in P5? P5 is where we're going to hold our attachments. P5 is going to take on that attachment right here. So if there is a value there, then I know to add a comma to separate them. So we do need to run a check inside the code. And we can do that here. If P5 does not equal empty, then P5 equals whatever's already in P5 plus the comma plus the file name. Otherwise, that means P5 is empty. Simply just add the attachments. So we can do that. That's how we can add multiple attachments, because we're simply adding what's already there to whatever is existing. And we're making sure that if there's something there, we're separating it by a comma. That's very important. Okay, great. Now we are ready to send that email, right? When I send that email, I want to make sure that those attachments get done as separate, right? When I click send now, I want to make sure that an email gets created with two separate attachments. You see here, there's two separate attachments. And I also want to make sure that the comment David's here and all the information is dynamic and gets created. So how are we going to do that? Well, we do that with just a little bit of code, and I'm going to walk you through it. The first thing we want to do is dimension the Outlook mail. Again, we're using late binding also on Outlook email as an object and the Outlook app as an object. We need email to, subject, message, variable name, variable value, variable format, and the attachment file. Notice the attachment file is going to be an array. Attachment file is a string. It's going to be an array because they're separated by commas, and we need to loop through all of the attachments inside a single string. So we're going to have a dimension the attachment number as long. I want to know the attachment number, how many, as we loop through those attachments. We're going to set those variables, the job folder in E3 just as we've done, the job title, the company, the document name. just as we did before, the email2 is going to take on whatever's in P3, subject's going to be whatever's in P7, and the message is going to be whatever's in P9. Great. So again, we're going to run through all the variables. This time, again, it's a little bit different. This time we're creating those variables, but for the email. So this time I want to take the subject and the message, wherever those variables are found, I want to replace them with the actual information. So we're going to run a loop from 13 to 30. We're looking for anywhere here, and we're replacing it with any values here. And so that's what we're going to do inside a loop. However, we're going to use the replace statement to help us do that. So we've already defined the subject and the message. So now we're going to set the variable name, the variable value, and the variable format just as we did before, exactly like we did before. However, we're going to take that subject and we're going to take that message and we're going to look for the variable name, and we're simply going to replace it with the variable value. And again, also using the worksheet function text, we're going to change the format, right? I want to make sure that the format of those variables gets honored, date, currency, whatever it is. And to do that, we use application worksheet function. We're going to take that format. So we're going to update the subject and update. So as we move through every variable, if any of those variables are found, they're going to be replaced with the actual value. That's it. That's all we have to do to get that proper text. We're ready to create our email. So to create the email, we're going to set an Outlook application. We're creating that, again, late binding, setting that application. Then I need to create an email within that application. So we're going to set that Outlook mail equal to the Outlook app, create item 0. It's going to create that email. We're going to focus on that email. We're setting that email2 to our email2, our subject to our subject, our message to our message. That's great, but now it's time to figure out if we're going to be adding attachments or not. How do we know? Well, we know based on this. If P5 is empty, we know that there's no attachments. However, if it is not empty, we know we're going to be looping through possibly more than one attachment. So how do we do that? Well, first we're going to check. If P5 value does not equal empty, we know that we're going to loop through the attachments. What I want to do is I want to create a split. I want to create an array using split. And we're going to split that entire string in P5. We're going to split it by that comma. That comma is our delimiter. So what that's going to do is going to allow us to create an array based on all of the email attachments in there. Now remember, these are only the names, right? Only the file names. We still need to add in the whole folder path. So we're going to create this array attachments file. And what we're going to do is we're going to create a loop for attachment equal L bound, meaning the lowest value, to the upper bound, the highest value. This is a dynamic loop. This is going to be 0 usually, and the upper bound, okay? So what that means is we're going to loop, because we don't know, this is going to create a dynamic loop based on how many attachments are in P5. So then we're ready to do. So now I've got the file name, each individual file name. So this attachment file 0 is going to be 1, 1 is going to be another one, starts off with 0. So this number, as this number grows, this specific value changes. So of course, this is only the file name, right? Our attachments only include the file name, right? That file name here is cover letter doc.q or Fred's Pharmacy.doc. So those are only the file names. So what I want to do is I want to combine this file name with the folder that it's supposed to go into to create that full file name. So we do that here. That file path is going to be based on that job folder and the document name and the backslash and of course our attachment file based on that variable. So this is how we loop that. This gets us our file path. Then all we have to do once we have that file path, this we don't need, that was just for a test. All we have to do then is simply attach that file right here. Attachments add file path. So this can loop through unlimited attachments inside a single string that we can do that. That's all we have to do. Last thing is I'm going to display the email. Now, if you want this email to be sent directly, use .send. I'll put a comment here. Use .send to send, spell that right, send email directly. Okay, so that's all we have to do. Great, and so that creates the email. Very, very cool. All right, so in this training, I show you how to create a dynamic email. I also show you how to create dynamic Word documents using templates, insert pictures, creating multiple jobs, saving, data mapping, conditional formatting, selection on job loads. Wow, what an incredible training. Thank you so much for joining us today. I really do appreciate that. If you like these trainings, don't forget to click subscribe, smash the like button, comment below. I respond to each and every comment. I really appreciate your continued help and guidance. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next week for a brand new training.